Alright, sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, you may record me.
Okay.
I may be at the end of my useful.
No, you're fine.
verbal
Anything's
life.
anything, as they say.
Well, tell me more about
What I know for sure is shorts sell more than videos themselves because people do not have very long attention spans or patience spans. So, honestly, a shorter conversation would feel like it would actually more likely sell. But
Let me ask you.
yeah.
What do you remember from anything I said that was useful to you or interesting?
What
or
you were
you
saying
wanna
about
follow up?
how I thought it was interesting about what you said about how they've changed. You were mentioning earlier about how you want to keep the 30% at a cap. You want it to be like the maximum.
Actually, it already is a maximum.
Ah.
And so if you can't ever pay less, because if you need affordable housing, and affordable housing is all considered, just 30% of your income, it's kind of like a tax.
Makes sense.
At some point, can't you pay less when all the expenses of the building have been depreciated, deducted, taken care of? And in co-ops, that can happen.
Makes sense.
But the cost of building today is so expensive, and the way the tax credits are designed, it's kind of like it's both a cap and a floor. And if it starts to go above what if the rents start to be more than your income,
Yeah.
as happens in tax credit projects, then you either have to suffer or you leave. You get evicted if you can't pay it. In Section 8, it's always whatever 30% of your income is, but it's the amount that the landlord gets that keeps going up and up and up. Not because your income went up, but you do have to leave if your income does go up over 30%.
Because they don't want them just to think they can keep raising it. That's the point of
Actually,
that?
the landlords can keep raising it as long as it's against the market. So because our market here in the Bay Area is basically lunatic, there's no reason for rents to go up 24% in 1 year across all private sector. So then the Section 8 landlords can apply for that 24% increase as soon as HUD verifies that that's the average, the market rate has gone up. It's kind of complex and bureaucratic, but, thinking ahead, what kind of system has that as its feedback? Where do you end up? And my sense is that depends on what you go into for a living.
Yeah.
What you'll end up, how much of your income will ever go to rent. And I was privileged enough that I was born and earning small amounts of money, but a minimum wage job where I lived in Rhode Island, I could afford a very nice, it wasn't a luxury house, but it was a house with 6 people and a lot of rooms, So, yeah. And the same when I even moved to Berkeley. So those kinds of places where the rents are more predicated on what are our expenses. Let's divide that 5 ways or 6 ways. Those are rare, very hard to find.
So do you live in kind of like a bit, I see they say hub house, is that what they call it?
I live in co-housing, which is, in our case, 3/4 of an acre, 14 households in 11 buildings. Our founding members bought it with money among themselves, and then they were able to redesign for their own household needs, and then they bought the houses from themselves, essentially, as condo units. And there's a cap on the price that we can resell for 30 years. And the community wanted to make it permanent, but the city of Berkeley attorney said, we can't be having that. We're going to make it 30 years. So that's in, I think, 3 years now. We get to sell if we wish for market rate. And the properties around us, $1.1 million for comparable.
And how much land does your group cover?
Well, the property we purchased was a little rental compound that we rehabbed. It's 3/4 of an acre.
Okay.
So we're not high density. We're not high density in the sense of, we're like little 1- and 2-story buildings. That's it.
Makes sense.
And we do have something we call the common house that might be like a clubhouse, except that it was an old house that has a lot of charm, wood paneling, cottage. You know, what is the term? Kind of arts and crafts.
Antique.
Wood shingle, round shingle, big trees. I can show you pictures. We're the most photographed co-housing in America, or we were for many years.
I guess that makes sense. And is that kind of... And I was more saying, in your group, if I'm allowed to ask, the group you talked about working with.
Oh, the Gray Panthers.
If I'm allowed to.
Can you you can mention Gray Panthers.
Okay. No.
East Bay Gray Panthers?
Yeah, so saying, what area do you cover exactly? Just the East Bay? What's the stretch?
You know, it's Gray Panthers nationally used to have as many as 100 chapters, 10,000 members, and there was one in Oakland and Berkeley, and probably one in Contra Costa County, just over the border. But so mostly our members are from Berkeley and Oakland. I'm trying to grow our Oakland membership because that's really where the action is. But Berkeley historically had more.
Well, Oakland was kind of the place where they were boxing on the Great Migration, right?
Yeah. Well.
Is that where they kind of all ended up, right?
Well, if you're talking about Black history, the railroads brought a lot of people because the railroad Pullman porters left their southern small towns or their urban towns where the railroad stopped, and a number of people came to the terminus in Oakland. It was very segregated. We're talking 1890s. I don't think it.
But was there something in the 20th century too, right?
Well, which Great Migration? That's
the second one, 20th century one.
I'm sorry, because there's.
There was one to escape Jim Crow, right?
Oh, yeah. A number of families, when I first moved to West Berkeley, came out even as early as the 1880s. Yeah. And then Jim Crow apparently was more 1910 and to World War II. So, yeah. And we did have a lot of industry, but Berkeley itself really was had more ethnic workers come. Blacks were really restricted as to where they could live.
Yeah.
So Oakland, specifically West Oakland, where the railroads ended. Yeah. Before you go to San Francisco, it ended in Oakland. So that's the historic. It was never 100% Black community, but it was the place where the Pullman porters had their end of the line.
This name comes from the hip hop origin.
Nice.
This team name comes from it.
It's a great.
Because they also renamed this street after Tupac recently. Because his first album was recorded in Oakland.
Oh wow.
It's very interesting.
Did he actually? I know someone who was like godmother to him, or he was very close. Her son was close to him, but she said he lived in Marin City. Did he ever live in Marin City?
I don't know. I don't know too much about him.
Maybe his mother moved there after.
I just know he did a lot of his recording in Oakland, so I don't know. Maybe the start, but he's not from Oakland.
Well, okay. So he came. I think that he was in Texas or I don't know. We could look it up.
I'd have to look it up, but part of me thought it was like Baltimore.
But I know that he had a base. Could be Baltimore.
Yeah,
but
I'd have to look that up.
He ended up, his family at least might still live in Marin City. But whether he ever lived in Oakland, that I don't know. It was kind of, he died so young. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, there you go.
They've also renamed, a street in West Oakland, Mandela Boulevard, and there's a Huey P. Newton Square. Huey P. Newton was one of the founders, leaders of the Black Panthers.
He is. His father was part of the party. He's from Harlem, East Harlem.
Oh, Tupac Shakur.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's from Harlem.
And when did he come out to the West Coast?
But he moved in '84 to Baltimore.
Okay.
That's why. And then in 1988, he moved to Marin City, which was nearby Mill Valley. It was an impoverished community at the time.
Marin City is war worker housing that was partly owned by the residents into cooperatives, but we're talking about public housing, and then they're still fighting fights. This whole thing we talked about today, the Marin Redevelopment Committee or the Marin Planning Commission, whatever, wanted to give the land to a for-profit developer who was going to redevelop, pay for the rehab, and create mixed income, which would have eliminated a whole bunch of homes for the people who live there now. Many of whom are very elderly people on very fixed incomes.
Yeah, because you're saying that about the that they're not helping like elderly at the moment, like for disabled people. The public housing. When you got all the calls at the start, you said.
Well, it's tax credit projects only have to make 3% of their units accessible to people with full real disabilities, like significant disabilities, like wheelchair access. So they make it like they only have to. They don't have to produce much in the way of extremely low income housing or housing that would be for seniors. So it's that. What do the numbers add up to over time? But yeah. But this particular thing was the people in Marin City were able to get a lawyer, and they fought this fact that the Marin Planning Commission or whatever, Marin owns the land under it, the county, and they're like, we just as soon get rid of as much of this public housing as possible. And they were ready to tear down and build more market rate, or at least moderate income. Yeah, from a kind of a shady national developer called Michaels Development, and they specialize in like military housing. Like they take over contract, and they're slumlords in many cases. I mean, military housing. I grew up in military housing, socialized housing. And it was fine, and it was great, and there were a ton of kids and families, and they had a whole class. They had a whole different, it was integrated. But Michaels took over the contracts because it was...
And they tried to segregate it then?
No, they didn't go back to segregation, but instead of providing decent housing on the base, Michaels runs it, pulls out as much cash as they can by under-fixing, under-maintaining, and then renting it for higher and higher rents to families. They don't pay the military much, but it used to be...
Well, that's the Prop 1 is to help the veterans now.
Well, that's more for homeless housing.
Oh.
Isn't it? I've
seen ads for it. I don't know how much you're reading that and saying it's complete BS or anything.
So one of the things, West Oakland was not where the Black Panthers started, but it was a few blocks.
Awesome.
It's another neighborhood closer to Berkeley, actually. But Elaine Brown, who was a leader, one of the few women leaders of the Black Panther Party, as it began to be assassinated by the FBI. Or people started, getting kind of crushed by the drug epidemic. They're about to open Black Panther. I think they're going to call it the Black Panther. She's opening housing for people who've come out of prison, the mass incarceration.
In Oakland or just?
Yeah. Oh. And she's been able to build it with this extremely low
And it's just to kind of help them get back on their feet, really? Or is it just
she's been running an urban farm for black, not just vets, but incarcerated, especially black men. She's been running an urban farm in West Oakland, real close to the tracks on 7th Street, which was a major street. And she's trying to help them entrepreneurially, because black men are more likely to be entrepreneurs, because they have to be, because they don't get jobs, they don't get steady employment. So there's like half of all black men declare themselves as business owners or entrepreneurs, and they're hustling. Or they might have a legitimate business, don't get me wrong. But she wanted to, she has a nonprofit that was providing business skills to create your own cooperative. But I think that's not going over quite the way she hoped it would. So most people, it's entrepreneurial skills. And but there's a lot of homeless people in that area, and so it's great that she's building this building in the heart of what was the black community in Oakland. So when you were talking about the migration, this was the place that the neighborhoods, it's really kind of, it looks like some of the historic neighborhoods around here.
It's pretty nice.
It's been gentrified, but it had.
Oh,
nice
it's one of the
houses.
highest in the country. You know it very well.
West Oakland?
Well,
or-
Oakland as a whole, right, is one of the highest gentrified places in the country, isn't it?
I didn't know that.
I
wouldn't
mean,
surprise me.
I mean,
Berkeley is certainly
so
way
my
up
dad
there.
said he could have been wrong. Might have been reading the wrong
because
thing.
it was, I call it when I first moved here, I called it the hole in the donut, by which I meant just money of investment didn't happen in Oakland.
Yeah. Well, now it's the
You
place
know?
that like the businesses want to leave.
Really? I
I
thought they
mean,
only
to
just...
randomly think that
Oh, well,
this
the
is
ball, yes.
the whole
The
that
sports.
issue thing too, and it's all like, does it kind of? People are kind of there. It's a divided thing. I mean, I know because kind of people are saying it's just a greedy owner, a billionaire that's not willing to pay for it. He owns the Gap Corporation, but then they're all like, oh, does it at the same time kind of serve the city right because of the crime rate? But it's like, no, you shouldn't
Crime
feel
rate
like
is not, the crime rate is being used and manipulated
Yeah.
to do all sorts of things, like get rid of the DA.
Yeah.
It's just propaganda to try to drive down prices so other people can buy it up or keep prices high. I'm like totally, but I do know people who are trying to buy the A's and
the Warriors owner. Yeah.
the Warriors, trying to buy it in a REIT or a MESBIC, which is minority-owned business enterprise consortium or something.
Yeah.
But they never could get the traction to actually buy it.
When
But they've
someone
been
wants to buy
trying.
the site, someone wants to convert the site, but it's very industrial is the problem.
Well-
Stadium site is very industrial.
Yeah, it's like acres and acres of cracked pavement. So
Yeah.
I don't know what was there before. Probably factories
Yeah.
and warehouses.
I think I've seen an old photo of it being built, and it was very empty. So the city grew up around it, I think.
No.
I think they just picked empty space because
The city was already there, but it moved into it. I think the city owns a lot of that.
It's half actually. It's half owned by the city. It's half owned by the county.
Okay.
That's the whole site.
Oh,
so
great.
that's why it's like the Oakland Alameda County like Coliseum is its name because that's the site
Yeah,
as a
it's
whole.
half owned
The whole
by-
lot,
I didn't
like
know.
including both pieces,
It's owned by the
It's
county.
basically sliced in half
Yeah.
with ownership.
Yeah.
And they tried to buy it out, but it was.
Well, that whole thing of local ownership of your own sports team.
Yeah.
Is it like, do you study the Green Bay Packers, which is
Oh yeah, that
apparently-
they're locally owned.
You know, I don't know if it could happen, but it didn't happen so far in California, has it? Are any of
I mean, that's why the
teams
chant is called "Sell the Team."
sell the team?
That's like all these. There's these shirts that say "Sell" on them, so they're all trying to get it. It's like give up your ownership.
Oh, for
Yeah.
the Warriors.
No, for the A's. They're trying to
For
get
the
the A's
A's.
owner to sell his ownership,
Oh, to
basically.
who? A
To just
local
anyone who will be
consortium?
like, just to anyone else.
Why can't he just keep it? Aren't they moving down here? Who moved down here? Some of the sports
49ers
teams from
did,
San
but-
Francisco?
49ers
Yeah, okay.
did, but no, it was the
How's
A's
that
want to go
going?
to the Mojave to Vegas, and it's
Oh,
like
God.
they're like, no, just give up your ownership. Come on, just give it to somebody else who want to like the actually cares about the city of Oakland and doesn't just follow the money.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a rough truth of anything.
But there was local buyers, like they were
Yeah.
trying to pool money. In
Well, there's a
REIT.
guy now. He's he's calling himself a gambler, and the idea is he's gonna do that project in the port. Like it's this idea that he's just gonna
What's he gonna do in the port?
So the idea was like leading into their plan to leave was that they were trying to build this new stadium north of Jack
With
London
lots of
Square.
high
It was on like the
boxes,
Howard
yeah.
Terminal. It was called.
Oh, okay.
And so the
Oh,
idea
okay.
was that the project kind of went on ice, but this guy is just like, well, it's already cleared some hurdles. I will sit through everything, and I have the money, so I'll like pay for it. And I'll gamble that there will be a team to fill it when it's done.
Wow.
So it's this kind of
Is
interesting.
he actually building?
Well, he's sitting back down with them. And the mayor
Okay.
has said like, hey, if you want to come back, sit down, sit down. So
Okay.
it's.
Well, there's elections.
Well, she probably knows too because the 81 days of the year, that's people's jobs, like 3,000 jobs in that place, right? That's people's livelihood that the
Yeah.
guy is like months
Yeah.
away from destroying. So
Yeah.
she has to think from that perspective too, right? And the
Yeah.
county too, right?
Yeah.
You have to think of that too. It's like,
Yeah. all the people who come in.
At the end of the day, you
bar,
have to think
park.
about that.
Yeah.
It's like that's a lot of people's
Well,
livelihood.
interestingly, in cities, these kinds of like abandoned spaces kind of create new possibilities. So, what I know that area now from, the Hagenberger, which goes to the airport at one end and the Coliseum kind of nearby on the other end. There's a tiny home village.
Oh,
and
really?
then there's also more like pallet home and RV village, which are kind of all white. I mean, I don't mean the people. I mean that they are not designed to be a place where you would say, oh, I like coming home here. The tiny home village is for youth, and it's like decorated up. It's called, I forget if they call it Youth Spirit Artworks. And it's, it's for 2 to 4 years, so it's not permanent housing. But the truth is, there's a bunch of people that would be willing to lease that land to put up a tiny home eco-village, work on it. And there's even a group that was trying to get Caltrans to let them lease land right next to the very polluted BART tracks. And
They did say there was a study that the pricing in Oakland at BART stations is lower than in other places. Like, it's a unique thing where instead of increasing the value, like the North Berkeley one, it's down and people don't want to set up next to there.
Next to BART. They are noisy. See, in Berkeley, at North Berkeley, it's underground. At South Berkeley, it's underground, but a few blocks away, it's above ground and through Oakland. Oakland did not have a strong community uprising to say, you're going to put it in the ground. You're going to keep it in the ground once you leave the bay. So that's that kind of, it costs more money to put it underground, and Oakland didn't have whatever.
The money to...
The clout to get BART to go underground there. So, that's interesting. And if it's above ground, it's definitely really noisy. Definitely.
Well, thank you for this.
Thanks. We're going roaming around.